Hello, my name is Mia Bice. Welcome to my presentation on the impact of multimedia learning on primary and secondary learners. The multimedia principle is a fast-growing learning platform throughout education, and it has transformed institutes of education as a whole. This particular learning platform can help students concentrate on their work and remain more focused throughout the time they are studying. Multimedia comes in many different forms, and it is important for educators to be flexible in using it so young learners may be able to reap the benefits of it. Technology has also played a role in helping with the success of multimedia use for students by adding not only pictures with text, but video and sometimes audio along with the text in the works. During this presentation, we will review multimedia, its impact on secondary and primary learners. We will also talk about the role that it plays with them and the gaps in research. Multimedia, the principle and framework in educational institutes throughout the world, has had a positive impact on primary and secondary learners. Multimedia learning is a concept that was developed in the 1990s by a gentleman named Richard E. Mayer, who was a psychologist and teacher, writes Motul Bayraktar, 2019. The concept is described as the combination of text and pictures or graphics together. The purpose of multimedia learning is to help students to maximize their learning through graphics, which can help them in education, and it can help their educational process to be more memorable and interesting. Students are capable of learning more when pictures are involved with text, and this is called multimedia, writes Clark and Mayer, 2024. The cognitive theory of learning states that words along with pictures create an effective cognitive process that helps with learning. Several types of graphics in multimedia for learners are involved, such as still pictures, animation, video, and those pictures also could be photography. It could be illustration, just as long as it is some type of graphic, and along with that graphic is included some text. It is important to see how this type of pedagogy can be implemented into a younger learner's lessons, since they tend to have shorter attention spans. The learning process can be heightened because of the link between words and graphics, which causes signaling in the brain and causes for a much more efficient learning process. Technology with multimedia can take this learning to another platform. It also helps students to be engaged, and as they are learning, multimedia is something that can help them. It helps for the lesson to be more effective when it is implemented into the educational realm. Mayer and his other colleagues help to validate the principles of multimedia learning in traditional and computer-based learning styles. Now, something that also happens with multimedia learning design is signaling and cueing. This happens when materials are presented, these types of graphics are presented with text, but not only text, but text that are located in certain areas. So, if there's a picture like we have on the left, and it's a sentence at the bottom that says the cat is wearing a hat. Clearly we can see the cat, and the cat is wearing a hat. But in our picture to the right, because there is almost a labeling of the hat and an arrow pointing to it, and a labeling of the cat with an arrow pointing to it, it causes an effect in the brain to help learning to be a bit more effective. Some other aspects in successful multimedia learning are spatial continuity, eye tracking, redundancy, and temporal cognitivity. Multimedia learning appeals differently to learners' senses and processing channels when words are contained with the pictures. And those words could be narration as well, states Multibakar in 2019. Through content and visual effects, this learning can successfully capture the attention of learners and help make learning fun and interesting. This can especially be helpful when instructors are teaching subject matters that are complex, especially to primary and secondary students. It can help them to get a better grasp of what is being taught to them. The cognitive theory of multimedia learning states that instructors and designers who are using multimedia learning should take the steps for narration and selecting images and organizing them and finding ways to include them inside of their lesson. Mayer 2024 states that fewer words should be used and the pictures that are used should not be too large, so large as they overpower the words. He also discusses the active process of assumption, which states learners should actively engage in their brain processing and mental experience. They further explained that this is because of research and evidence on the cognitive theory of learning. And It takes place, again, when text and pictures are located together. It helps the students to have a deeper capacity for learning, and they are able to reach greater cognitive achievements. Mayer's theory states that through this research, whether it is videos or pictures, it can help students with learning and that they can have a greater connection with the subject matter. Pulse-Patini 2019 argues that the cognitive functions that it creates for learners helps them to better understand the functions of the lesson being taught. Greater cognitive achievements are reached when multimedia learning is involved this way. Septini and Reckingstedt 2020. They further argue that multimedia involves interactions with learners and it helps their processing skills, which could change their attitude about learning. The reason graphics and multimedia can make such a difference in learning is because of the cognition, which is how the brain perceives something. Moen 2021 states that in some circumstances, text-based learning is normal, the normal cognitive load when students are learning can be reduced. Pictorial and verbal representation in a lesson can cause the brain's cognition and engagement to be higher because this type of stimuli has positive effects on the brain. Pulse-Patini 2019 studies says that some of the many positive results of multimedia learning are cognitive, imaginative, and motivation that increases in learners. Second and Taskin 2022 discuss in their study when graphics are highlighted, students have a greater test scores than when they are not. They attribute this to signaling, which is an effective process that happens when the brain's processing helps learners to link the text and graphics together. The onset of technology brought devices that could be used not only to help teachers, but also to help students, as well as a part of multimedia learning. Technology-based multimedia for primary and secondary students can benefit them in this practice because it helps them to stay on task and engaged. Multimedia and technology being used together is growing in the educational sector, and it is helping to have students enjoy a much more enriched learning experience, explains Seskin and Taskin 2022. Moen 2021 studied used pictures and put them together in a slideshow for students to observe as a supplemental lesson. This multimedia learning could also be used interactively, which helps learners to take part in the experience, and it can be hands-on. Also, writes Septini and Reckingstedt 2020. Multi and Bakar 2019 argue that this educational platform is growing quickly, and the theories about it are changing as the methods and technology change. They further state that more opportunities should be given for teachers and learners to involve multimedia that includes technology because of all the positive implications. Using multimedia with technology to create content that is digital, such as YouTube, can be of great benefit to students, states Tahor 2023. In their study, they researched the effect of YouTube and what it had on their learners as they incorporated it into a multimedia lesson. They continued to state that the students' creativity improved as much as 45% with the implementation of this type of multimedia. Tahor 2023 states that another positive aspect in it can be used as in the classroom, at home, through computers, through phones, and through tablets. Lessons are much more efficient for teachers and students, and learners can have learning done in almost any place, not only in the classroom with these type of advancements. They further stated that the perception people had of educational technology is changing as advancements are continually being made and with new educational resources being created. Another type of multimedia learning is three-dimensional. Research stated that when they showed students 3D materials, there was a difference in learning when they showed the materials in the 3D form. Technology incorporated this way into multimedia gave the learners a better representation of ideas and concepts that they had learned about in these lessons. And this type of learning scenario, cognitive behaviors changed with the influence of this type of learning, and it had positive results for the students. Al-Daraham 2020 stated that the confidence in students grew as they began to use the multimedia tools, and so did their success. And they had more fun in learning. Information, communication, and technology is another source of multimedia learning that can be included, such as PowerPoint presentations, states Septini Rangingish 2020. They further state that ICT based in multimedia is almost necessary in today's classroom and educational era since the onset of technology. In their research, they studied how ICT and multimedia can not only help students, but they can physically interact with lessons as opposed to just listening to traditional lectures. Septini and Rangish 2020 continue to state that students get engaged in self-efficacy through this form of multimedia, and they felt much more in control of their lessons and learnings. The interactive process not only helped them to learn, but students felt more freedom with their learning, and they felt that this process was much more appealing. Complex learning can also take place with augmented reality AR or virtual reality, which is VR, infused with words and instructional designs, argues Setkin and Taskin. AR and VR utilize unique features in multimedia by allowing students to observe virtual objects in their lessons. They continue to state that this can contribute to the learning process through a development of an artificial environment, and they observe items more successfully. VR can give learners the opportunity to explore subject matter that may be dangerous, or they might not have another opportunity to explore any other way if it were not for virtual learning and the virtual world. This feature also involves a learning platform that still accomplishes learning, but in a controlled and safe environment. STEM, which is an acronym for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, is another form of multimedia. STEM can and does allow students to enjoy learning because not only is it multimedia and students can connect the words with pictures and objects, but it has a hands-on aspect to it. Students can also develop the ability to become critical thinkers because of the advantages that they are offered through STEM multimedia. When multimedia is implemented on primary and secondary learners, instructors first must always keep in mind the age and grade level of their learners, Tahir 2023 argues. Avrand and Raskan 2021 research was done on 6th grade students and how multimedia lessons could improve their vocabulary. Upon interjecting videos into their lessons, the learners showed a greater understanding of vocabulary because of the use of these multimedia lessons. This type of learning platform can not only help students learn, but can help students show how work can be done more effectively. This study was done on 24 special education students who have used multimedia learning, and the study showed that it helped them to retain the information much longer upon watching videos that explained lessons as opposed to lectures or reading them from books. This not only showed that students prefer these lessons, but they did listen and they found the process much more interesting than they did had they used traditional methods. These instructional videos help students by means of technology to make improvements and help them with self-efficacy. Learners showed a significant difference in being interested in the online videos as opposed to traditional learning. Multimedia that is technology-based can help learners to optimize projects, students that they present as well as watch, states Pastini 2019. Alderaham 2020 stated that multimedia in the form that it is presented It can be a very attractive learning tool to fourth grade students. They stated that digital learning in the form of multimedia can help students to harness learning and bring a great needed attention to the subject matter. The components involved in technology can be of great use to learners in primary and secondary grades, states Alderham 2020. In their research, they showed that students enjoy 3D learning as well as learning from YouTube. Tahir's research created and implemented digital content by way of instructional videos to supplement their learning, and they found that students were much more engaged. Those same students scored higher on assessments than those students who did not have the benefits of the multimedia platform. They further stated that learners decided that it was much more interesting and that they did not become bored with graphics or videos. Septini and Reshkin researched interactive software on computers to see if it could help students to build character traits. These students viewed and participated in multimedia coursework that showed learners a historical figure that they were to observe. This multimedia learning gave them a chance to afterwards decide if they wanted to take on the character traits of this historical figure after watching the video. The learners were positively affected by this interactive process, and the majority of students said that they would indeed like to take on the character traits because of this resource. Septini and Reshkin 2020 state that there was a cognitive process that affected their decision making to adopt these positive traits because of the multimedia lesson. In a study by PIM 2020 that was done on 7th and 8th graders to see if their students preferred learning with a storyboard that was digital or without. They did this study on 6 schools to research this depth. They included a very large number of students in their studies. Storyboards were made from scratch by students that included animated characters, and these learners were to either choose the digital storyboards or non-digital learning. The students definitely preferred digital storyboards and had greater learning outcomes, and they showed a definite preference with visual teaching as opposed to teaching that did not include visual learning included with the text. Now, there were some gaps in the research, so future research should be done. One of which is that Alderham, Seskin, and Taskin's research did not say how long it took for instructors to learn this type of technology before teaching. This is important because teachers need to know how to implement this to the learners. Also, Septini and Reshkin researched a very small group of 5th and 8th graders for their research. It would be a much more effective study if they included larger groups of students. Also, research was limited also to certain grade levels. It would be much more successful if they included all grade levels in primary as well as secondary students. Several different types of multimedia was used in this research, which included virtual learning, augmented reality, pictures, YouTube, just to name a few. And I wonder if all the multimedia had the same amount of success. So research should be done on which multimedia has more success than others, or do they have about the same amount of success? In conclusion, Auber-Jamron 2020 argued that studies have been shown that when learning was taught with both graphic and words, there was a tremendous difference in learning. Students showed that they preferred visual learning involved in the lesson with graphics and text. Positive effects definitely came from the learning process. It showed students to have greater retention, engagement, collaboration, understanding, and problem solving. Learners can and will have much more advancements when multimedia is incorporated. Multimedia has shown to motivate students. It can add stimulus and cause the process to be greater for the ability of learners. Overall, multimedia principles have shown to have a positive effect on learners in primary and secondary grades. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.